Welcome to Shadowland's Ghosts, a place where the veil between reality and the unknown is at its thinnest. I'm your host, Raven Blackwood, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey into the heart of darkness. As we settle in, the fire crackles, the wind whispers through the trees, and the stars twinkle like ice chips in a midnight sky. It's a peaceful evening, the kind that makes you feel like everything is going to be all right. But as the night wears on, the shadows begin to stir, and the darkness starts to seep in. Tonight, we're going to take a trip down the world's loneliest road, a path that stretches out like a skeletal finger, beckoning us towards the unknown. Our story is called The Ghostly Watchman Who Waited at the End of the World's Loneliest Road, a tale of isolation, madness, and the horrors that lurk in the most desolate of places. But be warned, the road we're about to travel is not for the faint of heart. Before we begin, I want to invite you to subscribe to Shadowland's Ghosts and join our community of fellow travelers. Together, we'll explore the darkest corners of the human experience, and I promise you, it won't be a lonely journey. As a member of our family, you'll get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and the chance to participate in our live events. Now, as we embark on this journey, I want you to imagine that you're not just a passive listener, but an active participant. You're going to experience the story from the perspective of the lead character, a person who's about to face the ultimate test of courage and sanity. So, sit back, relax, and let the darkness close in around you. The road to the end of the world is long and treacherous, but with you by my side, I know we'll make it to the end. Together, let's take the first step into the unknown. I'd been driving for hours, the endless stretch of asphalt unwinding before me like a serpent slithering through the desert. The GPS had long since given up, refusing to acknowledge my existence in this godforsaken place. I was alone, the only sound the hum of the engine and the soft crunch of gravel beneath my tires. The world's loneliest road, they called it, a path that seemed to lead to nowhere, yet somehow I felt drawn to its desolate beauty. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but the road behind me was empty, the only signs of life the twisted rock formations that jutted out of the earth like skeletal fingers. I shivered, despite the warmth of the evening, and focused on the road ahead. The dashboard clock read 8:47 p.m. I'd been driving for 6 hours, and the last sign of civilization was a faded gas station sign that read, "Next stop, nowhere." I chuckled to myself, thinking it was a joke, but the laughter died on my lips as the darkness seemed to press in around me. The stars were beginning to twinkle overhead, like diamonds scattered across the velvet expanse. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night air wash over me, and breathed in deeply. The scent of creosote and mesquite filled my lungs, and for a moment, I felt at peace. But as the night wore on, the silence began to unnerve me. I turned on the radio, scanning the dial for any sign of life, but all I got was static. I was truly alone, the only living soul in a vast, desolate landscape. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being waited for. That somewhere, out there in the darkness, someone or something was watching me, waiting for me to reach the end of the world's loneliest road. As I continued driving, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, like a fog that clung to my skin. I turned the radio back on, hoping to find some distraction from the oppressive silence. The static crackled and spat, but suddenly, a faint voice whispered through the speakers. Lost, find, help. The words were indistinct, but the tone sent a shiver down my spine. I spun the dial, trying to find the source of the transmission, but it was gone, replaced by the familiar static. I wondered if I'd imagined it, but the hairs on the back of my neck refused to lie flat. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of headlights in the distance. But when I looked again, there was nothing. The road behind me was empty. The only signs of life, the twisted rock formations that seemed to loom closer in the darkness. The dashboard clock read 10:02 p.m. I'd been driving for 8 hours, and the last sign of civilization was still that faded gas station sign. I was starting to feel like I was trapped in some kind of time loop, doomed to drive this desolate road forever. As I rounded a bend, I noticed something strange. The stars above seemed to be shifting, the constellations rearranging themselves in a pattern I didn't recognize. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was fatigue, but when I looked again, the stars were still twisted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. I felt a creeping sense of unease, as if I was being pulled into some kind of cosmic puzzle. The world around me seemed to be shifting, like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle being rearranged. And then I saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road, its back to me. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing, as the figure slowly turned to face me. But as I looked into its face, I realized it was just a signpost, a weathered wooden pole with a faded sign that read, "Next stop, nowhere." I laughed, feeling foolish, but the laughter died on my lips as I noticed something strange. The signpost seemed to be closer than I remembered, and the letters on the sign seemed to be shifting, rearranging themselves in a message that made my blood run cold. "Turn back now," the sign seemed to say, "while you still can." I hesitated, feeling a creeping sense of dread, as the darkness seemed to close in around me. And then I saw it. A shadowy figure standing just beyond the signpost, watching me with eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. I floored it, speeding away from the signpost and the figure, as the darkness seemed to erupt into chaos around me. The stars above seemed to be spinning, like a madman's carousel, and the world around me seemed to be descending into madness. I was driving blind, fueled by adrenaline and fear, as the world's loneliest road seemed to stretch out before me like a twisted, nightmarish labyrinth. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled my very soul, that I was not alone. As I sped away from the signpost, the darkness seemed to coalesce into a living, breathing entity that pursued me with relentless intent. The stars above pulsed with an otherworldly energy, like a malevolent heartbeat that synchronized with my own racing pulse. The world around me had become a twisted, surreal landscape, where the laws of reality no longer applied. The figure with the glowing eyes was still out there. I was certain of it. I could feel its presence, a cold, calculating weight that pressed down upon me like a physical force. I floored it, the tires screeching in protest as I took a sharp turn, but the darkness seemed to keep pace with me, always lurking just beyond the reach of my headlights. And then I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road, its eyes glowing like hot coals in the dark. I swerved to avoid it, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of its face. It was my own face, twisted into a macabre grin. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing with terror, as the figure vanished into thin air. The car skidded to a stop, and I sat there, frozen in horror, as the darkness seemed to close in around me. And then I heard it. A voice, low and raspy, that seemed to come from all around me. "You should have turned back," it said, "while you still could." I spun around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from the very fabric of the darkness itself. I knew then that I was in the grip of something ancient and malevolent, something that had been waiting for me on this desolate road. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was not just driving through the night. I was driving through a portal to a realm of madness and terror. The darkness was not just a lack of light. It was a living, breathing entity that had its own twisted agenda. And I was its next victim. The car's headlights flickered and died, plunging me into total darkness. I was alone, surrounded by an unseen horror that seemed to be closing in on me from all sides. I knew then that I had to get out of there, to escape the clutches of this malevolent force before it was too late. But as I turned the key in the ignition, I heard the voice again, its tone dripping with malevolence. "You'll never escape," it said. "You're already mine." The engine roared to life, but as I put it in gear, I knew that I was driving into the very heart of madness itself. The darkness seemed to be pulling me in, like a moth to a flame, and I knew that I would never be the same again. I floored it, the tires screeching in protest as I sped into the heart of the darkness. The world around me was a blur of twisted, surreal landscapes, the stars above pulsing with an otherworldly energy that seemed to synchronize with my own racing pulse. The voice laughed, a low, raspy sound that seemed to come from all around me, and I knew then that I was completely at its mercy. As I drove, the darkness seemed to close in around me, like a living, breathing entity that was determined to consume me whole. I could feel its presence, a cold, calculating weight that pressed down upon me like a physical force. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. And then I saw it. The figure with the glowing eyes, standing in the middle of the road, its eyes fixed on me with an unspeakable malevolence. I swerved to avoid it, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of its face. It was my own face, twisted into a macabre grin. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing with terror, as the figure vanished into thin air. But as I sat there, frozen in horror, I realized that I was not alone. The darkness seemed to be coalescing into a living, breathing entity that was closing in on me from all sides. I spun around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from the very fabric of the darkness itself, and it was laughing at me, a low, raspy sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You'll never escape," it said. "You're already mine." I knew then that I had to get out of there, to escape the clutches of this malevolent force before it was too late. But as I turned the key in the ignition, the engine died, plunging me into total darkness. I was alone, surrounded by an unseen horror that seemed to be closing in on me from all sides. And then I saw it. The figure with the glowing eyes, standing right next to me, its eyes fixed on me with an unspeakable malevolence. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure reached out a hand and touched my face, and I felt a wave of ice-cold fear wash over me. I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. As the darkness closed in around me, I realized that I was staring into the face of madness itself. The figure's eyes glowed brighter, and I felt my own sanity begin to unravel. I was consumed by a sense of utter terror, a feeling that I was being pulled apart by unseen forces. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the side of the road, the car crashed and burning behind me. I stumbled to my feet, my mind reeling with the horrors that I had witnessed. I knew then that I had faced the ultimate terror, a horror that had been waiting for me on that desolate road. As I stumbled away from the wreckage, I heard the voice one last time, its tone dripping with malevolence. "You'll never forget," it said. "You'll never escape." I knew then that I would never be the same again, that I had been forever changed by the horrors that I had witnessed on that night. The darkness had left its mark on me, a scar that would never heal. As I stumbled away from the wreckage, the darkness seemed to seep into my very soul. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the figure with the glowing eyes was still lurking just out of sight. The voice's parting words echoed in my mind. "You'll never forget, you'll never escape." I knew then that I would be forever trapped in the memories of that night, haunted by the horrors that I had witnessed. I stumbled through the darkness, my heart still racing with fear. I had no idea where I was or where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get as far away from the wreckage as possible. I walked for what felt like hours, the darkness closing in around me like a shroud. As I walked, I began to notice something strange. The world around me seemed to be shifting and twisting like a living, breathing entity. The stars above pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down upon me. I knew then that I had not escaped the horrors of that night. I had simply brought them with me into the real world. The darkness had infected me, and I was now a part of it. As I stumbled through the darkness, I caught glimpses of the figure with the glowing eyes. It was always just out of sight, watching me, waiting for me. I knew then that I would never be able to escape its gaze. I walked for what felt like an eternity, the darkness closing in around me. I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. And then I saw a light in the distance. It was a faint glow, but it was enough to give me hope. I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I saw that it was a gas station. I stumbled inside, collapsing onto the floor. I was safe, or so I thought. As I looked around, I saw that the gas station was empty. There was no one there, just me. And then I saw it. The figure with the glowing eyes, standing just outside the door. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of the darkness closing in around me. I was trapped, and I knew that I would never be able to escape. The last thing I saw was the figure's face, twisted into a macabre grin. And then everything went black. When they found me, I was curled up in a ball on the floor of the gas station, my eyes wide with terror. I never spoke of that night, but the darkness remained with me, a constant reminder of the horrors that I had witnessed. Years later, people would say that they saw me driving down that same road, the tires screeching in protest as I sped into the heart of the darkness. They would say that I was laughing, a low, raspy sound that sent shivers down their spines. But I was never seen again. The darkness had consumed me, and I was never heard from again. The last thing that was ever seen was the figure with the glowing eyes, standing in the middle of the road, watching and waiting. Epilogue: The Road to Nowhere. Years after my disappearance, the locals would whisper about the cursed road that I had driven down that fateful night. They said that anyone who drove down that road would be consumed by the same darkness that had taken me. They said that on certain nights, when the stars were aligned just right, you could still see the figure with the glowing eyes standing in the middle of the road, watching and waiting. But there was another rumor, one that was far more sinister. People said that if you drove down that road, you would see me driving alongside you, my eyes black as coal, my face twisted into a macabre grin. They said that I would be driving a car with no license plate, no headlights, and no sound. I would be driving a car that was not of this world. They said that if you looked into my eyes, you would see the abyss staring back at you. You would see the darkness that had consumed me, the horror that I had witnessed that night. And if you looked too long, you would be consumed by it too. The road was abandoned, left to decay and rot. But on certain nights, when the wind was blowing just right, you could still hear the sound of tires screeching in protest, the sound of laughter that sent shivers down your spine. And if you listened closely, you would hear the voice whispering in your ear. You'll never forget, you'll never escape. The voice would say, the darkness will always be with you, watching and waiting. The last thing you would see was the figure with the glowing eyes, standing in the middle of the road, watching and waiting. And then everything would go black. Wow, we've made it to the end of the road to nowhere. I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for joining me on this journey. Your engagement, your comments, and your continued support mean the world to me, and I'm honored that you've chosen to spend your time with me. As we conclude this series, I want to leave you with a lasting impression, a reminder that the stories we share on this channel are not just mere entertainment, but a gateway to exploring the human experience. We delve into the darkest corners of our imagination, and sometimes that's where the most fascinating stories lie. If you've enjoyed this series, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling content. We're committed to crafting stories that will leave you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's lurking in the shadows. By subscribing, you'll gain access to a wealth of exclusive content, including behind-the-scenes insights, bonus episodes, and early access to new series. So, if you're ready to embark on more spine-tingling adventures, hit that subscribe button and join our community of fellow storytellers. Let's explore the unknown together, and may the darkness be our guide. As a token of appreciation, I'd like to ask you to share this series with your friends and family who enjoy a good thrill. Your support means everything to me, and I'm confident that together we can create a community that celebrates the art of storytelling. Once again, thank you for watching The Road to Nowhere. I'll see you in the next series, and remember, the darkness is always watching, waiting for you to take the next step. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating content. Your support is the fuel that drives us forward, and we're grateful for your loyalty. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and keep exploring the unknown. Subscribe now and join the journey. Your channel link